Welcome everyone. We are going to get started. It's just a couple minutes after 7, so I know there's going to be a few more people that log on. But I wanted to welcome everyone, so I'm extremely glad to be here. This all started with a conversation with Dr. G and myself over the weekend, and I promised that we would have 5 people to at least attend, and we were just over 290. So this has gained the momentum beyond what I could have expected. And this is actually a national conversation right now. So we have people from across the country on this call, from Portland to Seattle to Nashville over to Boston. So I'm just really excited and inspired by the response that this has gotten from just a simple idea. And so as part of that, I want to thank you for your patience with some links changing. We had to update some technology just to make sure that everyone could be here tonight. And thank you for sharing with your networks. That's what really made this happen. And so I've been asked, is this going to be recorded? And it will be. But it's not going to be shared immediately with those who can't attend. The Justified Anger team is going to work to clean it up a little bit, and it will be an available resource for those who couldn't attend in the coming weeks. And so due to the volume as well, we're actually going to go and have you guys input your questions or comments through the chat throughout this discussion. And Samantha's actually going to be monitoring it, and we're going to be checking in on that. But we predict there's going to be a lot of questions that come in. And so we're going to talk about a follow-up session at the end of this as well. So just a couple things to get started. I work for American Family Insurance, and I want to just make it clear that this is not an AmFam sponsored event. So AmFam is doing a lot of incredible things in the community right now, and I just didn't want the lines to be blurred between me and my employer right now. So these are truly going to be views of Dr. G and myself. And so as we look to kind of what's going on right now, I just want to take a minute to recognize that there is systemic racism that is significantly impacting the communities outside of the African American and Black community. There's various marginalized groups such as Hispanic and Asian and more that are being impacted today by everything going on. And so that said, tonight is really going to focus on the African American and Black community, with a slight lean towards the efforts in Madison, simply because Dr. G is here, but we promise to make this as broad as we can because we recognize this is national, and I promise you the things that we discuss tonight will be impactful in the communities that you're in as well. And so I also want to just level set that this is going to go beyond the very recent events, and we want to respect those who have been experiencing this injustice. So when we think about George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, we know that we're going to be talking about them tonight, but we want to respect the hundreds of other African Americans who have been murdered by the police. And those 3 names that I just mentioned have been a catalyst for this discussion, but I just want to make sure that we're respecting everyone who's going through this. With just another example yesterday of a gentleman by the name of David McCarthy in Louisville who was murdered by a police officer who did not have his body cam on. And so I just want to recognize that there are other things that are going on that just don't get the same media, but we do see that they're occurring. And my key point before we get started is I want everyone to be just as emotional as they are over those types of situations as we are over the everyday systemic racism that exists beyond these recent events. And so this tonight is going to be about the inherent bias and the systemic racism that has permeated our country for 400 years. So this is going to go much deeper than those 3 events, but I understand that those horrific murders are symptoms of a society that really assign the value of one's life and privileges based on the color of your skin. And so you're going to hear me say this a couple times, but this is a white person problem. And when I say that, it's really the accountability of those with privilege, myself included, to stand with the communities right now and dismantle the systemic racism that exists in our country. This is not fair or right to put that on those who are already marginalized because of the system. And so with that, we're going to dive in. I want you to open your heart and minds tonight and make a difference in how you show up to your community tomorrow and every day after. So with that, I want to introduce Dr. G. He is the president, the founder, and the visionary for the nonprofit Nehemiah, whose vision is engaging the greater Madison community to empower the African American individuals, families, and communities for really talking about hope, transformation, and justice. So he's been in this work for 35 years, fighting for racial justice, and he spent a lot of his time educating, coaching, and mobilizing white allies. And that's what we're here for tonight. And so I'm really excited to introduce him. There he is. And so you could do a quick Google search. He's not going to tell you about all of the awards and all of the recognition he's gotten and all of the impact he's made. You're going to see it if you were to just put his name in Google. So he's too humble to recognize that. So I wanted to say that. But with that, I want to thank you for your time, Dr. G. We're incredibly fortunate that you offered your time. And with that, we'll start on just kind of a basic question. And that's just, how are you feeling about everything that's going on right now in the news and everything that you're seeing?
Daniel, first, let me just say I really appreciate your efforts in putting this together and the folks and the friends at Generator. This means a lot to me. Typically, our team would have to organize the back office part of this, setting up all of the things, managing the questions, giving people the link. So it really is refreshing to be able to come on such a, to talk about such a somber situation, but not have to worry about all the logistics. So I just want to say I appreciate it. Daniel, I'm tired. I'm beleaguered. My mind was just getting used to the newness of the impact of COVID-19 on Black people and self-quarantining. I run two organizations, so taking a church of a couple of hundred people and staff, and then a nonprofit that's reaching a couple hundred people all offline, and getting used to that reality, and then dealing with the situation. I actually was doing a Facebook Live about the situation with Amy Cooper in Central Park. And while I was doing this live talk, someone actually wrote a message and said, "Have you heard about what's happening in Minnesota?" And I said, "No." So actually I got that while I was online live. And so just overwhelmed and beleaguered at what's happening, what's being said, what's not being said. I don't know if this nightmare can get any crazier for this country or for people of color, specifically Black people. I don't know if it can get any crazier.
And so thank you for sharing that. And one of the things that I appreciated is when we had our conversation on Saturday, I called and I said, "Hey, what can I do to start taking action?" And your next comment really struck me, and that's where we're going to go next. And you had mentioned actions without understanding the real issues of what's going on aren't going to be sustainable, and they're not going to make the lasting impact. And so I found that really powerful, and that's where I wanted to start the discussion as well. And so what are the racial issues right now that we need to better understand before we can thoughtfully take action?
Sure. I'll just say this as a backdrop, Daniel. Sometimes when African-American people speak up about issues facing us, it's easy to write it off as propaganda or someone being angry or not wanting to take responsibility. My approach to history is really one of a scholarly approach. My undergraduate degree is in African-American history and economics from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So this is something that I've studied and have thought about deeply for about the past 35 years, but it's something I have lived deeply for the past 56 years. Beginning with my mom giving me the talk about how I might be seen or perceived as an African-American. And it was not a talk that promotes self-victimization, because my mother moved here from the west side of Chicago, where she'd grown up, to attend the university as a 30-year-old mom going through a divorce with two young kids. She was helping us to adapt to a world that had a total minority population of maybe 2.5%. That's combined. Native American, Asian American, Latino, Black. And so just from shifting that mindset to then going into a school where the teachers thought everyone needed to learn that people who look like me used to be slaves. Now, granted, when I left first grade in Chicago, Mrs. Alice Turner never thought that it was important to teach a classroom full of Black people that we were slaves. That wasn't her take. So the issue is that we have this history, and we have people living in parallel universes or realities. They're a tale of at least two cities in Madison. The issues are America's never really wrestled with its sins and its complicity in slavery and its treatment of indigenous people, Native American people. So the real issue is that the wealth and the strength of America has been built on the free labor. I mean, I know this is not an AmFam sponsored event, but just think if a company as large as AmFam had no personnel budget. I mean, mine's a small organization, but just imagine if the university, if the state of Wisconsin, any major corporation, Microsoft had no personnel costs, which is the largest budget item in any budget for serious business. Imagine what you could accomplish and what you could put into other things. And it continued to grow, to grow into this superpower just a couple hundred years. It grew so fast that America invited immigrants from Europe to come to make garden tools and overalls and boots. So because Black people were wearing them out, working for free, picking cotton, sugar cane that became molasses, that became rum. And so people think that cotton made America rich. It's really the molasses that made rum that made America rich. So it was really a couple of other things. It was sugar, it was rum, and then it was cotton. Cotton was sort of late to that. And then the industries that supported that, the insurance companies that insured the slave ships, the people who worked in the shipping yards, the people who worked on the railroads, the people who bottled the rum, all of those were jobs that were created on the backs of this industry, this new industry, the New World, the United States, that was built by free labor. And so the real issues is that we have changed laws and regulation, but we have never really bridged that loss of economic empowerment, that catch up that African Americans drawing a blank on the word, but I want to say exposure, but that's not it. But exploitation of African American people. So you have a nation that quickly rises. Like if you look at the history of the world, what other country has ever risen to the place of superpower in just a couple of 100 years? When you think about the Roman Empire, the Grecian Empire, the Egyptian Empire, the British Empire, they're ancient. When you think about this newbie, and it was race-based. I understand at some point every group had been enslaved, but it was race-based. The worth of the individual was tied to their racial identity. And then it shaped politics, it shaped elections, it shaped religion, it shaped so many things. And then as America became to solidify its statehood with its constitution, there were referrals to people being only 3/5 of a person so that they couldn't overrepresent themselves, or you needed to be free and male and white. And so the real issues are that we've not wrestled with those. And we have been told that they've gone away. We have been told that Jim Crow no longer exists, that Martin Luther King had a march. He went to Washington and a couple of million people showed up, or 250,000 people showed up, and we fixed all of this. We have Oprah and Michael Jordan, and we have had President Barack Obama. And so Black people said to ourselves when President Obama was elected, we said they're either going to assassinate him or the country is going to swing back and say, hell no, they're not taking over our country. And so even as we watch the incredulous things that are being said by the person in the White House right now, there's still this murmuring, we said it, we knew it. We knew there's going to be backlash, but we didn't know it was going to be like this. So the issues that we're really dealing with, Daniel, is that we have the perception of equality, but not the reality. And I'll give this example. I'm sorry, Daniel, I won't make every answer this long, but if you just say the problem is racism.
This is what we're here to discuss.
Okay. I have recently, I have a documentary that's out about this, but I've recently traced my family back to the G plantation in Mississippi. So I have found on Ancestry.com, and I've traveled to Mississippi on more than one occasion to interact with my white relatives, who we are genetically G's, and we share, with one of the cousins I've met, his great-grandfather and my great-great-grandfather were half-brothers. So the G's have always been white, kind of camped out in France and in the UK. Most of them came to the New World as Welsh. I've even found the Homestead Act papers signed by President Van Buren that allowed Reuben G to acquire property in Mississippi, where he raped a slave named Venus. They had a son named Henderson G. Henderson is my grandfather's grandfather. And so I went down to meet these folks, and we built a relationship. We've been in each other's homes, and we actually it's because we're not responsible for history. They're not responsible for history. We've actually are developing a family bond. My cousin John's daughter, Meg, called my daughter, Lexi. They're both in grad school to say, hey, cuz, how are you doing? Completely white woman, completely black woman, and their relatives. You know, they come from the same slaveholder, Reuben G., who cheated on his wife, Aurelia, as he raped his slave, Venus. And they are the daughters of that marriage and that rape. And so we look at things and it's easy to say, well, glory be, look how you caught up. There's been no residual effects of slavery. Except what I would ask is, if you live next door to someone who rented for 100 years and someone who owned a home for 100 years, would the equity position be the same or not? We're talking about a position of equity. Those relatives have a 150-year head start on us. They generated wealth. They've owned flower shops, flower chains. They've sent kids to grad school. My mom and my dad picked cotton for a living for sharecroppers. Through my father's lineage, I am the first descendant. I'm of that generation of the first I'm of my father's lineage. I'm his only son. Now I'm his oldest son. I'm the first G son in his line who has not had to pick cotton for a living. He was a sharecropper. My grandfather Ernest was a sharecropper. My great-grandfather Ernest was born after the Civil War. He was a sharecropper, and Henderson was a slave. And Reuben was the slave owner. So I'm a descendant of a slave and a slave owner. I'm descendants of both of those folks. My white relatives are not. So I've got slave owner and slave in me. And so to think that because we've elected a black president or we enjoy black entertainers does not negate the fact that my white relative, since the Civil War, has had the ability to acquire equity, to bequeath wealth from one generation to the next, to buy land, to buy property, to leverage it, to go to grad school, to do these kinds of things. And the fact that 150 years later, my daughter and John's daughter are both doing great work. His daughter is at a prestigious Ivy League school. Lexi's at Wisconsin. It says a lot about the people who raised me, and particularly the women who raised me, that we can look at our social status and say we're somewhat at a comparable state. But if you looked at acquired wealth and established equity, we're still a century behind. And we function in a world that thinks that not only are we equal, we should be grateful for what we have. And because I'm middle class and black and educated, I shouldn't complain about anything because I am proof that slavery has no residual effect and nothing is further from the truth. And so what we're finding out is we are having these issues because we have not necessarily reconciled that. When I think about what's happened, anyway, let me just pause right there, Daniel. I won't go into the whole stuff. I'm getting excited, but also I will say when these kinds of discussions, they're a slow on ramp. And when you get talking about it, you want people to know. And so I'm having to tell myself, one, that it's okay to talk about this. Two, that you got good questions. But I just have to say, I've gone into news interviews, not in this go round, but I'd say a few years ago, where the people have asked me like in 12 minutes to tell my story and what I think is going on. And as I'm walking out of the studio, I actually hear them say, and up next is Sparky, the juggling dog. Because they've got to balance the sadness of this with something that's cute. And I walked out feeling completely used, like, okay, I was just holding a slot. So I think when I feel that the space is good and important, I just want to dump everything, but I want to pause. We've got a good hour or so to talk and some follow-up. But once you get yourself to the place to be vulnerable and talk about these issues, it's hard to kind of rein it in after each question. I'll try to be more succinct because I want to respond to questions. But that's the backdrop of what we have. And we've been taught that this is fixed and we're the same, but we are no closer to each other, being in each other's homes and each other's lives than our grandparents were to each other.
And I want to kind of go back to something really quick that you started off with, Dr. G, and that was talking, you mentioned COVID very briefly. And I don't want to undermine the criticality. Everybody right now, every single person is impacted by COVID. However, can you speak to just a little bit more about how these issues have been magnified by COVID for the African American and Black community? And then we'll get into allyship after that.
Sure. What we're hearing is that it's affecting more African American folks. And so the rhetoric and the assumptions are that we don't have health care. What we do have is the weight and pressure of carrying microaggressions that I know because of the work that we do with the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and Public Policy, that it has now been proven. Our mayor Mayor Satia has actually confirmed a statement through the Common Council that says that the pressures related to race for people of color has now been deemed as a social determinant of health. So the stress that comes from not just worrying about my okay, but is my wife okay? Is my daughter okay? Is my mom, who's in a memory facility, is she experiencing diversity so that there's adequate care? Because of the constant pressure trying to figure out and navigate issues, and even when issues are not racially related, Daniel, we still have to ask ourselves, was that racially motivated? So that if it is blatant, somebody burns across my lawn and calls me the N-word, I know what that is and what to do. But when it's not so clear, then it makes it a little bit more insidious. And so what has happened is that the issues of stress have been proven to have an impact, let's just say on African Americans and their bodies, weakening central nervous systems. And so there's more cases of diabetes and hypertension. Before any of us knew what hypertension was, we learned that high blood pressure and diabetes, type 2 diabetes, are precursors for dementia. So because I'm the co-chair of the Healthy Brain Committee for the Black community, I'm working closely with Dr. Gary Gleason and her team at the University of Wisconsin. We now know that these issues that are carried a lot by Black and brown people make us prone to dementia, make us prone to stroke, heart attack, because stress is doing that, the fight or flight. So when COVID-19 when it was revealed, that not only did it show the disparities in health, but that we were dying, Black people said, you mean there's another disease out there that we're leading the charge on, and it's related to stress? And now schools of public health and medicine are saying that much of this is caused by stress of trying to navigate this space. Our grandparents have said, I'm sick and tired of this. We didn't really know what they meant. So when folks were making, and I was invited to some of this space, Daniel. I was invited to some of the space where we were making decisions on who gets ventilators. It was a statewide committee. It was a very sort of hush-hush group. We met maybe 2.5 months ago. What was sort of understood is that those with pre-existing issues would probably be the first to not be given a ventilator. So those of us who are people of color, I was the only African-American faith leader on this. I said, wait, so we're going to punish people who have lived punished lives. So folks who have tried to navigate spaces like Wisconsin, equality for their children, we're ground zero for the Black community. According to an Andy E. Casey funded report through Race to Equity, we now know that the gap between Black and white reading levels, I just got a call from one of the newspapers. It's now been discovered that Black and white home ownership has the greatest disparity between Blacks and whites. That brings stress. That's creating weakened systems so that diseases are being developed. And we are now going to tell people who look like me that they may not make the cut for a ventilator, not because they are smoking cigarettes or destroying their livers from drinking, but just by being Black and navigating white space. And so when we hear about the large numbers of African Americans who have died to COVID-19, then I don't even know if they got ventilated. Like, we're not even seeing the disaggregation of that information. So we don't know how much more we can take, or how much more can be demonstrated that we are prone by navigating these spaces. And so it's so subtle, again, that the rhetoric is they don't go to checkups, they don't have insurance, they're poor, they use the ER as their clinic, and that's why. I'm in my mid-50s, and every Black male I know has either hypertension or diabetes, and every older Black man who I consider a mentor, 10 or 15 years older, has either prostate cancer, diabetes, hypertension, and these are men who are in good shape. Not all of them are heavyweight and obese. They walk, they did college athletics, and it's just frightening.
And so you just shared a lot with our group. So thank you for giving us that background. And I want to stop and pause for just a second. Samantha, are there any questions from those who are listening? I did see there was one that we'll get to in just a minute about involving teens without putting their safety at risk. But is there anything specific to like the issues that have come in that we should take right now?
So first of all, just a lot of love coming in for Dr. G, definitely. Thank you so much for being here, of course. The questions up to this point are very much around allyship and engagement and just what viewers can do to be part of the change. So I would say at this time we're really, centering around that.
Okay. So let's jump right into that then, because that's where we want to go next. And before we do that, I wanted to share, and this is a personal, quick couple things that I learned when we start talking about allyship. And I learned this, when I heard this, it was a kind of a blow to my ego, to be completely honest. And I heard, you don't get to call yourself an ally. Those in the community that you are helping they get to call you that. And just because they call you that doesn't mean you have that forever. It's how you show up every single day and what you're doing in your actions. And previously I was like, I'm an ally, and I gave myself that title. And I want to share that was a mistake that I made, to give that precursor. And I shared that with Dr. G prior as well. And so now that we better understand the issues, can you talk about what does it mean to be an ally and to lean into allyship? And then we're going to dive into some of the specific examples of what we can do.
Sure. Let me say something, Dan, that's helpful and perhaps equally as much of a blow to the psyche or the ego of those who are listening. If you don't know CPR and you try to administer it, you can kill someone. If you don't know what you're doing, you can hurt someone. I mentioned earlier that, and I won't forget my point about getting to the allies. In my Department of African American Studies, it just started in 69 or 70. Students protested to get a Black Studies department. My mom was in it when it was brand new, and it's just turned 50, and I've been asked to come back and be the speaker of the department's 50th anniversary, which is a huge, huge honor to come back to your alma mater and speak to it. But my advisor was white. The department chair was white, and the majority of the students were white. I had so many arguments with white allies, that my experiences as a Black person were not valid because, well, no, that's not true because my friend Vincent in Ohio told me, and my cousin Cassandra, who dated a Black guy in undergrad, he said that Black people don't eat grits. White people argued with Black folks about the Black experience on a regular basis. And we walked out of humanities and thought, what the hell is this? What universe are we living in where 19-year-old white co-eds are telling us that our experiences aren't really our experiences because the one Black person they know told them that that's not the case? There's a lot of danger in making oneself an ally. So I need to really put that out there. I think what happens in Wisconsin, and I have to tell you, I like allies. But what I have to say is, someone may have a cough, but if we're not trained, is that a tickle in the throat? Is it allergies? Is it bronchitis? Is it lung cancer? Is it tuberculosis? Because understanding what it is determines what you're treating. Because if it's lung cancer and you give someone a throat lozenge, it may stop the issue, the result, but it doesn't fix the issue because cough drops don't fix lung cancer or bronchitis. What happens when an incident like this happens is I think people awaken out of apathy. And I'm speaking specifically to non-Black allies and real specifically to white allies. And I think the knee-jerk reaction to do something that's very Western, let's fix it, let's check it off, let's make it better. Oh my gosh, I don't want to be part of a racist system. And people run off in 15, 20 different directions, and they don't understand that it's a long game. So when I say that it is important to understand the issues, to educate oneself, to understand how we got here is really, really important. Because for white allies or would-be allies to not understand how whiteness has impacted their life, but they're trying to free mine, is an abdication of the truest power that a white person has. That is to understand, to acknowledge, to admit to what degree they have benefited from this. And so I just want to say, educate, 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 learn, learn, learn. Dan, I'm getting notes from friends all over the country. They're saying, hey, you're on our board, or hey, we're friends, or we're in this association. Can you please help us draft our statement about this? Now, these are my friends, and so I really want to help them. But what's happening is these white allies are wagging their fingers at white society. And I'm thinking, you're a 60-year-old white man. I'm sure you've benefited as a male, as a white male, as an educated white male, as a middle-class educated white male. You're talking like you somehow swam in the murky waters of Monona, Lake Monona, and you didn't swim through any phosphorus or algae-ridden waters, and so you didn't capture any of the junk or the gook or the stuff that or the messiness that's in Lake Monona. Somehow you swam through it your whole life for 60 years, and you didn't get any of that soot in your gills. Racism is not just what you do to people, it's what whiteness has done to you. It's not just, folks on this call are not going to burn a cross on my lawn. They're not going to call me the N-word. They better not. That's not what I'm worried about. But if they're in all white boards, all white funding circles, all white schools, library, all white books, no one black is, or other ethnic groups are being promoted, where we really live and carry this out is where we're even oblivious to this. Well, there aren't that many black people in tech. You want to bet? Well, we can't get black people to Wisconsin. That's what the head of Madison Teachers Inc. said years ago. I heard him on a radio interview. Wisconsin's so cold. He said, well, black people want to be with their people, and they want to be where it's warm. Well, black people want to work. There are black people in Juneau, Alaska. I'm very serious. There are black people in Juneau, Alaska. That's further north. It's much colder, much darker. But we play these things out that black people aren't in our fields, in our offices, because they just don't apply. We don't apply in in their places, and never assume that there might be something very implicit, very toxic in those environments that impede the entrance and the survival of people of color. So unless allies understand this and really play it out in their hearts and minds and understand how it's benefited them, they're not allies. In another life, Dan, I used to sell cars. After my first job out of college, I used to sell used cars on the west side of Madison. And I kind of forgot that because it was hard work, and for a lot of reasons, I didn't really think about it. Now, I was raised by a single mom, and I grew up with a sister. So I lived in a house with women. My wife and I have a daughter, just one child, and my mother-in-law lives with us. So she has since my daughter was born. My daughter was a preemie, 1.5 pounds. So my mother-in-law moved to Madison about 24 years ago to help us take care of it. I've grown up in lived in two homes where I was the only male figure. I'm woke. I'm not chauvinistic. I get women's issues. I'm sensitive. I'm gonna make my mama proud, my wife proud. People told black women in the community, if you marry a mama's boy, you got a good man. And so I have all this stuff that's going on. But when my wife told me I don't like to go to the car dealership alone because they talk to me differently, my response was, no, they don't. And then I had two thoughts. One, shit, yes, they do. I used to sell cars. I remember stuff that we said. And two, the fact that I didn't believe what a woman told me about her own experience proved that I was just as chauvinistic. Where did I get that from? That I'm going to talk her out of her issues? That doesn't really happen. What gave me the right? So even though I've lived it, I have not peeled back the veneer of how I've been shaped in my benefit as a male. And so what I'm saying to folks is that we don't need folks who are sleepwalking. We don't need folks who are playing this or who just want to get something fixed so they really feel better. What we really need allies to understand is we have a problem that keeps reoccurring. And I'm just going to say this I'm going to say this in a way that's helpful to our white folks. And I'm going to say it that keeps me with my black card. The protesters in Charlottesville, the police officer who knelt on George Floyd, these folks are white people's children. They have parents, they have Sunday school teachers, they have aunts, they have uncles. Folks didn't just wake up and just thought this is not a life. If white people who want to be allies don't have the talk with their kids, if mothers are not talking to their daughters about what Amy Cooper did, if moms whose sons are now Cub Scouts, Webelos, security guards, if they're not having this talk, I don't want to talk to you about allyship. Because what happens is they become an anomaly. They're not normally us. So they have no action. So what my white friends say to me who want to be allies is, Alex, I feel this very deeply. I feel this very, very deeply. They're saying it to me and nobody black is in that company. Nobody black is in that office. Nobody black is in that studio. But they're telling me, and I know they mean they're feeling it. I'm not negating that. But an ally doesn't just feel. And so what I'm talking about is, if you can ever relate to what it's like to be black in America today, but you don't relate to that police officer, and you as a white woman don't relate to Amy Cooper, then who do you relate to? You're absolved, and you have to do nothing but just tell black people, I stand with you, I'm in solidarity, I feel it, I would never do it. Amy Cooper was somebody's daughter. And if we're not talking to folks about when you weaponize your tears, when you weaponize yourself, when you weaponize the police against someone, when you've been taught that these folks are bad. In Madison, white kids are coming home telling their parents, Mom, the brown people are the bad people and they get in trouble. I'm not saying black kids aren't acting up, but come on, I grew up in Madison School District. There were a lot of white kids that were acting up, but we never thought it was all white kids. So if we're not having that talk, if we're not starting at home, if we're not having that, if pastors are not having this, that's not an ally. If you're a colleague and you're going to write a letter to the paper, but not talk to your constituents, your audience, your congregation, your friends, your board, that's not an ally. And so for me, an ally has got to really understand not only what the issues are of those people, how have those issues systematically separated us from others where we can see and not care? Why do we think certain people are bad? Why do we have certain kind of fear in our hearts about people? Where does that come from? Where does that start? Why do we think people are inferior? And so an ally really educates themselves in the issues by understanding it, by reading. There are some nationally recognized podcasters in this community who are doing things. I do Black Like Me. My sister has one that's called Defending Black Girlhood. And Dan, I know you're going to get this to people, but I'm saying there are things we can begin to listen to and watch and open with new ears and hearts and engaging ourselves. Do we know Black people? Do we know people of color? Well, they don't live in our neighborhoods. Well, let's take a look at the history of that. There were community clauses that said Black people could not live in Nakoma or Sherwood. They called us of Ethiopian descent. But those are neighborhoods that are still pretty much all white. But what we don't realize is that in Madison, Wisconsin, Dan, you went through our history class, we showed the clause. There was a clause in the book that actually said, you can't do this. And what makes it even scarier is that the neighborhood in Sherwood that had that clause, the president of the neighborhood association that drafted that was President Elvium, who went on to become one of the presidents of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So how does UW-Madison say that it doesn't have a problem when one of its presidents who didn't think Black people should live in Sherwood, and let me tell you, Sherwood's not a cheap place to live. So they're not telling people who couldn't afford they couldn't live there. Was it the Black faculty? Was it the Black doctors Who were the people who were told they couldn't live there? Because if you couldn't afford it, nobody had to tell you not to live there. Imagine what Shorewood and Tacoma would be, what Wisconsin would be, the university, if we didn't have those kinds of clauses. So we even have to know our history, why we don't even have more diverse neighbors. But let's go out of our way. Let's take a class. Let's join an organization. Let's go to the Juneteenth celebration. Let's find out more about Cinco de Mayo. Let's find out these things and put ourselves there. Allies don't wait for information and opportunities to fall in their laps. They go looking for it because they really want to understand. There's a plethora of things that you're going to be able to read. Dan's going to give you a link where on our Nehemiah page, there's a button that says Join the Struggle that offers movies, guides, books, study groups. We offer a U.S. Black History course. We're going to be expanding it because we don't have enough physical space to put everybody in that place. But please, 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 allies, let's not worry about wagging our finger, because to Black people, we don't think that the worst thing in the world is being a racist. We think that there are so many things that's worse than that. Child abusers, kidnappers, murderers, cops who kneel on people's necks until they die. And my little brother's a police officer in Chicago. So I don't hate cops. I think they're all bad. I know really good cops. But I think the point that I'm making is racism is not just your temperament to destroy Black people. It's your oblivion. And it's not because you even chose it. These things were taken out of your textbooks. They were taken out of your reality, off of your television. So you would grow up thinking you were better, smarter, and we were lazier, and that we liked it. We have old pictures of Black people enslaved smiling and doing jigs and dancing because white people couldn't sleep thinking that what they were doing was destructive. And so they forced jigs and dance to make them think we thought we were better in that position. If we don't understand that that's how we've acquired wealth, if we don't understand that that's how we've acquired big businesses, if we don't understand that that's how so many places are built, then you can't help. Princeton was built by, and I know this because I know the president of the seminary who just did a slave audit. It wasn't built with slave labor, but it was built by the money of slave owners. Black students have to sit in buildings named after slave owners who donated money to Princeton. If we don't understand that, then don't be rallying about diversity at a university or seminary. We have to know that, and you have people in this community, you can Google stuff, we can help you to understand, because until you understand the depth of it, you're not equipped to help begin to treat it and unravel it. And it begins in how we talk to our own families, our own friends, and our own kids.
Wow. That was a very detailed answer. And to be honest, that goes way deeper than even I was anticipating. And so I'm sorry, Dan, can I just say two things just real quickly? Absolutely.
The other thing is allies. We need allies to move beyond just saying this sucks. Back in the day, they were called abolitionists. They hired Black people who were running away. They hid them, sorry. They did things to really assist. What I'm finding is that many times white folks will want to connect to be absolved, but not to really be helpful. And so allies, they educate themselves, but they also donate. And this is not a shameless plug, but allies want to be told what to do. And no, I want to give out a backpack. I want to make a sandwich. Those don't break systems. When we wanted to break free of Britain, we didn't make sandwiches. We dumped tea into the harbor. We did things to change systemic reality. And so we find that folks don't support the things that we do. They don't come and find out how they can support. They want to get information, then feel better, and they affiliate. They connect themselves with these organizations. I'm sorry, I just want to say that allies educate, they donate, they affiliate, because it's a process. But those who do help to bring great systemic change. I see it happening with graduates of our history class and friends that I know. I'm watching them open doors that Blacks have not normally have access to, and it's helping us to make all of Madison better.
And so this kind of goes, in like the donate and affiliate. There was a question, and then I'll ask Samantha if there's other questions that have come in. I know there are quite a few. And so
okay.
As Dr. G shared, we will be sending out resources afterwards. So everything that he's mentioning, we will be sending out as a follow-up, as our promise to you. So the one thing I did we got earlier, even before this event, was what can we do to volunteer virtually, or obviously physical volunteering once that becomes safe, but what about virtual volunteering right now? What does that look like from your perspective, and what resources are out there?
Sure, there's a couple things. One, this was not so virtual. But Judge / Reverend Everett Mitchell is he's also part of our Black Ministers Alliance. We're working together to do a peaceful march. Now, it's with the faith community, but anyone is welcome. But that's folks from Islam, from Judaism. We're calling our faith community and ecumenical community to come with us, and members of their groups. So I just want to say to folks who might belong to one of those, that's one thing that people can do. That's this Sunday. We're going to gather at 5:30 in Library Mall. We'll have more information. Dan will give you a link to our Nehemiah stuff, and so you can come there and we'll send a notice out to people. The other thing virtually that you can do is, if you don't subscribe to people's websites or their organizations, they don't know you're there. And so they don't know how to involve you. So right now there's a lot of talk about a community oversight team for policing in Dane County. There are 27 affiliate police departments. It's not just Madison, but it's the town, et cetera, et cetera. People will need letter writing campaigns. They will need to know if this is an issue that's important to you. We now have over 130 confirmed COVID-19 cases in Wisconsin jails. And we know it's going to affect many people, but we already know who's going to die. There's a gentleman from our community who was on a 3-week hold, didn't get his inhaler because he has, anyway, there are opportunities to write and to canvass either the governor or the head of the Secretary of Corrections or the sheriff. So I would say that there are letter writing campaigns. The other piece of it is, again, it's so limited because we have to do everything virtually. But I will say again, and I don't mean just to belabor the point, but there's so much information that just opens our eyes. We believe that once people open their eyes, they'll begin to say, I can do this. Like, Dan, we didn't tell you to go partner with Generator and create something that has 368 participants. But you came to a class, you posted a tweet, I wrote to you, you came to something I sponsored for Watching Just Mercy, you introduced me to a friend who's going to help us prepare people for their initial appearances, and you called me on Saturday. You wrote me because we had a contact, because we worked together, we developed a rapport. And you said, I got this idea. And I said, you know what? I like that idea. I'm glad it's not this weekend because I can't do it. But let's do it. You think you can get 40, 50 people together? Let's do it. But I didn't tell you to do that. But because you've read and you thought and you realize you're a project manager and you can pull things together, you began to figure out how some of that information allowed you to be active. Friends can pull circles of their folks together, their friends, call a Zoom meeting and say, hey, can we watch 13th? I got a study guide. It's on our website. It's on our Nehemiah website. Can we watch the guide and go through it together? Can we read The Warmth of Other Suns? People can really do this virtually. You can create your own book groups. You can find out what organizations you want to support. We're going to listen to this podcast. We're going to listen to Defending Black Girlhood, and then we're going to talk about it together. Many people don't know that right now 65,000 Black women are reported missing in the United States of America at this moment. That doesn't include those who are not reported missing. That's those who are reported missing. That documentary talks about one particular Black woman who went missing for about 12 years and no one reported it. And she lived in Madison. She grew up in our community and I didn't even know it. And you probably didn't know it. And so there's so many things that will do this. Prepare yourselves. It's going to infuriate you. I tell people in our history class, lean in this because it's going to make you think, oh my God, I got to rethink everything. But don't forget, I got the talk at 6 and I had to handle it. You're older than 6, you're educated, you got experience. And this may shock your comfort, but it's not going to ruin your world. That was the beginning of my living in a dual reality. I had to know, I grew up when I first moved here from Chicago, I lived on the east side of Madison. So my mom had to train me to hang out with kids from Maple Bluff, to swim at the Maple Bluff Country Club at the beach and not feel less than, but still be very proud to be African American. I had learned to navigate Maple Bluff and my single mother-headed household. And I lived with that as a 6-year-old and knew how to do it. You can handle it, but you got to live in and realize this is our reality. Look at how we adjusted to COVID-19. Who would have thought, Dan, that you could work at home as an employee of a huge conglomerate like yours? Who would have thought that we could do this? But we've adapted. I think when the reality hits our white allies, they can adapt, but there's not been adaptation because there's not been the realization of what's really going on. And when that happens, the thoughts and the ideas flow, and they're not just limited to what Black people tell you to do. You begin to research things out, and we can coach and guide and befriend you in the journey. But you can begin to think, you know what? When this is over, I know how to fix bikes. I can teach kids how to start a bike fixing business. I know how to code. I'm going to start teaching kids how to code online. I'm going to ask folks, my friends, with your nieces, nephews, aunts, and would they want to send their kids to learn how to code? Once you begin thinking, and what I will say to you as a Black friend who really is encouraged by white allies, I just like to talk straight because it's a matter of life and death right now. It's not just cutesy and, you know, can you sing the Black national anthem and do you get kente cloth? This is real. After Ahmaud Arbery's murder, I no longer have the flexibility to do my evening constitutional walk. Now I'm not going to stay stuck there, but when I get ready to walk, I think, crap, the sun's kind of setting, and it's like and it's, again, that's not even real, but because it's in my head, it is real. My lender lives 3 houses down. She watches our mail when we go out of town. Very nice woman. I want to take a picture of her deck because I want to put one on my house. So I called her up, said, hey, can I come and take a look at your deck? Because I'm having someone come over. She said, yeah. She said, just come in the backyard. We don't have any dogs. They're not out. So I did it. But as I was pulling up, her cousin who's visiting was getting out of the van with kids. So I stopped and said, hey, I'll make up her name, is Mary home? Her sister, this cousin, looked really frightened. Now, let me just stop and say this. I'm not saying that woman was a racist. She didn't say anything mean. She may not even have felt anything negative. But the fact that the way she looked at me, she didn't know that there were Black people in the community. We've always been like one of the only Black people on this block. I'm calling out her cousin by name. I felt uncomfortable. And I stepped further away from the driveway and in the middle of the street so that it didn't look like I was walking up on this white woman taking kids out of the car. Now, she went and said, there's some guy outside. She came outside, she said, hey, Alice, come on, let's go in the backyard. And her cousin could see that we knew each other. But if my white allies don't know that I don't get into elevators with white women if it opens the door and they look nervous, because either I don't want the embarrassment of them clutching their purses or stuff that I've seen happen, that Black men take the stairs to avoid what Amy Cooper lived out in Central Park. If we don't understand that even though I am not even saying that her cousin was racist, but the fact that I have to assume it, and I don't mean assume it, let me say that right, that it comes in my mind that what happens in New York City, what happens in Georgia affects how I interact with the community where I have lived for 25 years. That's unconscionable. And so we've got to really begin to understand that these are things we got to talk about. What do we do to deflate that? And how do we bring the real discussions up of the lack of diversity other than, well, no one applies, no one wants to work in this all-white firm. What do? We just have to understand that folks who we think are woke, Black, and acceptable all carry these secret realities in our heads that makes it extremely tiring to operate in this space. And we know that exhaustion could lead to premature death if we don't find ways to talk about it and ask our white friends and allies to also talk about it.
Thank you for sharing all of that. And I'm just doing a quick check on time. So Samantha, get the next question queued up. But I want to be respectful of everyone's time as well. So we did say this was going to be a 7 to 8. But Dr. G, would you be willing to stay on for a few extra minutes to answer a few of the questions that have come in?
Well, Dan, I think that's white privilege for you to ask me that.
Of
Of course, Dan, you know. I told you that. Listen, I'm a long talker. Plus, I owe people because I had long answers. So I will stay until Generator or Daniel kick me off. But I can stay for a few more minutes because I see this as really, really important. For people to log in and want to know what steps to take, I take this as a very serious opportunity, and I appreciate it.
So thank you for that. And so for those who do have to jump off, I wanted to just share a couple next steps. So thank you so much for your time, Dr. G, and for Generator for putting this on, really allowing that technology. But it's really hard for me to believe after listening to Dr. G for 60 minutes that you're not going to be committed to furthering racial justice in your community, wherever that is that from where you're listening. So if you're feeling motivated and if you're feeling committed, we're going to ask you to show up in your community to do the work. And so one of the things that we've been talking about is we've learned from Dr. G tonight that education is key. We've talked about relationships and the dialogue that's essential. So we're going to, like I said, we're going to follow up with the resources that Nehemiah and Justified Anger have already had, as well as what he's mentioned tonight. We're going to compile questions we don't get to tonight. So we did not expect 375 people to show up. And so we're getting a lot of great questions. This is the best problem to have. We are going to document all of these questions, and we're going to talk about coming back together. So a good friend said yesterday to me, don't talk about it, be about it. And so our ask of you, when we say be about it, is go to your community, educate yourself, make a difference. And so Dr. G was gracious enough to say that in 4 to 5 weeks, we're going to come back. So our ask is that you go out, listen to the podcast, read the books, have the discussions, and we're going to come back, talk about what you've learned, talk about what are the next steps, additional questions you have 4 to 5 weeks out, now that you've just started that journey that maybe you haven't before. And we're going to then keep this discussion going. So I don't want you to think this is let's check the box. I listened to an hour session. I'm good for the next year. That is not what this was intended to be. And it's all about action. So in 4 to 5 weeks, expect a follow-up. We do have all of your emails from when you actually registered. So that's why we did that. And so we're going to ask you to lean into those hard conversations, lean into the uncomfortable situations you may find yourself in, and lean into that allyship. And so with that, there's one more thing coming up on June 5th, Madison 365 and the Boys and Girls Club of Dane County. They're actually going to be doing a day-long statewide event. They are pulling in local leaders in the racial justice arena. And yes, it's going to be covering a panel discussion from criminal justice reform to education to healthcare to workplace equity. And it's going to be on the Boys and Girls Club and Madison 365 Facebook page. I will send that out afterwards, but that is Friday. So I just wanted to say, if you wanted to hear, additional perspectives, let's make sure that we get that to you. And so that said, if you have to jump off, we totally respect that. But with that, Samantha, are there a question or two that we can pose to Dr. G to keep the discussion going?
Yep, absolutely. Actually, if we can start, because we did have a couple questions on this, but Patty or Maggie, if you are able to just recap the recording terms, just to make sure that everyone's clear on that. And I apologize that I don't know those in detail.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are recording this presentation, but we will be sending it to the team now, and it'll be updated and hopefully edited within the next couple of days.
Awesome. Okay. Perfect.
And one last thing really quick I forgot to mention, Samantha, is we want to keep the conversations going. So with what I send out, we're going to ask you keep the discussions going on social media. What did you learn tonight? What actions did you do? What actions are you thinking of doing? What questions do you have? And then just do a hashtag lean into allyship. We don't want the conversation tonight to end. We want this to be something between now and the next event that keeps us going in our communities to continue increasing the impact of what we're trying to do here. So forgot to mention that. And then Samantha, we can go with the next question.
Okay, perfect. So then we had many, many questions around resources, right? And how to kind of where to go from here and what steps to take. So I know you have touched on that. So I, again, just wanted to revisit around education, donating and affiliating, right? Like those follow-ups will be coming. If there's anything you wanted to add now, that's great. Otherwise, we can just kind of address all of those now and let you know that we will be providing a list of resources and specific follow-up on that, because that was definitely a heavy theme.
Definitely. For the sake of time, definitely, people will look out for that follow-up email. Daniel, will that be going out later tonight or tomorrow, or how soon?
So I'll be working with your staff after this to be just compiling everything. I'm still waiting on something, so I would hope within the next 24 hours.
Great.
That's the goal. We're just going to see make sure we can.
That'll be really great. I just, again, I'll just say this will just be a shameless plug. If you go to nehemiah.org, that's NEHEMIAH.org. There's a button that says join the struggle. And there's just so many resources that are there. Daniel mentioned the event that's sponsored by the Urban League and Boys and Girls Club. That's going to be an all-star lineup. That's a way of really educating yourselves. But the reason why I pushed our site is because there's so many things you can read, watch, and engage in. It's like any other kind of relationship. You can't just meet someone and then be ready to spend the rest of your lives with them in 5 minutes. It really does take interacting with each other. And Ally finds a way to interact. Much of the work that I do has been enabled and empowered by my non-Black allies, folks who are Asian American, Latino, white, who have said, we have a heart for what you're doing. We built a rapport, and they have helped much of this to happen. So my work, this platform, is a result of relationships with non-Black people. So I want you to know allyship really does work, and it changes the world, but it's not an easy process.
Thank you. Okay, so another heavy theme that we had was just all about having the talk and starting at home, which you had, referenced and, challenged us with initially. A specific question on that. So if we can dive into that any further, that would be fantastic. That's a question and something that I personally feel committed to doing and don't always know where to start or exactly what to say and how to say it. We have a comment from Jamie, and she says, as a white person, how do you have the conversation with the Black and brown kids in your family that are being raised in a whiteness that does not include their main influences educating themselves on knowing the conversation must be different?
Ooh. I was thinking that the question was going another way. So Samantha, just for clarification, this is Jamie's asking for African-American children in her family who are not being raised with awareness about their own cultural identity.
It sounds that way, yes. Yep.
I have to just tell you, that breaks my heart. I've done a lot of family counseling as a trained faith and religious leader. The results of what happens to individuals who experience that, it's heart-wrenching. For me, the subtext seems to be, we can teach these kids some structure that Black people couldn't, and if we could just put this in them, they'll be okay. Those children are often, in many cases, that's redundant, taught to be afraid of Black people, don't associate with Black people. They're different. And the sad thing is, in this world today, when you're out at night, you have a hoodie on, folks don't know that your mom and dad are white. Folks don't know that your family is white. Folks, I've talked to white friends who've adopted, who have not had the talk, and then the police will do something, a teacher will do and say something. They'll say, oh my gosh, they thought it would be different in the world. So I would say it is not just enough, Jamie, to talk about the teaching of the kids, and don't just teach them slavery. I know they're not your children, Jamie. Please don't start with slavery. Start with the beauty of the culture, and don't just let the Black kids read it. Let their cousins and siblings read to understand the beauty of that culture. The other thing is, the parents must have cross-cultural friends. The parents must, I'm comfortable with white people, not because I lived in Madison, because my mom had white people in our home. My mom had cross-cultural relationships. We can't eat at all white tables at home and then think our kids are going to diversify the lunchroom. Let's stop that lie to ourselves. We don't do it at work, so why do we think an 8-year-old, an 8th grader will do it? So that the parents have got to understand the importance to their children to have those cross-cultural relationships, or that child's going to have a hard way, because the Black children will sense the distance and the white children will polarize them. Who are you? You're too white to be Black, too Black to be white. And they won't know how to navigate. And when they're no longer in that home, they still look Black and they'll be treated that way. And they will just have, I'm not trying to paint such a dark thing. It's not enough to just, in my opinion, to just do that cross-culturally and you do not build a bridge to those communities. That I have just seen it do so much damage. So please, please, please build those relationships, talk to those kids, but the parents need to start reading books, and the whole family's got to come around that kid and those children. It's just so important. That culture is there, and they will not be completely whole human beings if somehow that's withheld because it's not good or not helpful to them. They need it to survive.
And just to jump
Great
into
question,
Samantha, there was a question that had come in, and it was actually a question we didn't get to as well, which is, how do we make sustainable change, Dr. G? So we've seen this happen, this goes in cycles with the media, right? With Trayvon Martin and so many others, right? Back to 2012, and then we start looking at Michael Brown and Tony Robinson here in Madison, Philando Castile. There's so many hundreds more. And then we get emotional, and then we go back to our lives. And so how do we make sure that this is sustainable moving forward? and not just a point in time.
Sure. It's a really great question. I think what has to happen is that individuals like you all, Patty, Maggie, Samantha, Dan, have to understand what this is costing you and your children, your future children. What's it costing people if we don't do this? Think about the folks who don't believe that global warming is real. By the time we wake up, what have we done to the ozone? What have we done? Then isn't it too late to try to fix that? We can't just say, oops, we want a mulligan. This isn't freaking golf. We're talking about lives. And so if it's just someone else in their life and their misfortune, that's one thing. But if the white community and the non-Black community, but specifically the white community, doesn't understand the cost financially, the cost emotionally, and what we are bequeathing to the next generation of kids if we don't commit to a long game. A long game. I don't have to wait for the Santa Ana winds to set another forest fire in California to say, oh, global warming is real. And I'm not trying to go off on a political tangent about global warming, but I'm just saying, once you've lost it, you've lost it. Once waters are destroyed, they're messed up for a whole generation. And so if we love our children and we love our country, and I love my child and I love my country, I just don't love his actions. I want it to be what it can be. But if we don't understand that the work of Nehemiah is to make a stronger Madison for all, we're not just trying to just build up Black people. We believe that Madison can be great while it's being said that this is the worst place in the country for us to live. We incarcerate more Black men on a per capita basis than any place else in this country. Our Black babies die of infant mortality. Our infant mortality rate for Black children in places like Racine rivals that of third world countries at war. That is 80 miles east of us, people. So if we don't think that that's going to have an impact on us and society, pulling Black men out, putting them in prison when they should be in families and having children, if we don't realize the impact on society, emotionally, financially, psychologically, culturally, we won't really get involved. I've had well-meaning friends over the years say, you got to write more articles like Justified. You got to write a report or an article every year to keep it in front of us. Listen, I care about the ozone. I live in Fitchburg. We're the state leader, I'm told. We used to be in recycling. I'm not going to wait till the planet gets messed up to think, crap, I should have done stuff. I want to err on being wrong. So I'm going to recycle. I'm going to separate. I'm going to put my stuff. I'm going to try to do my part in making the world better. I'm going to speak to white allies and not knowing if people are listening to me and multitasking while they're watching something on television. But I'm going to do my part because I don't want to be said that they were a group of potential white folks who want to know what can we do, speak for real to us and miss that opportunity. Because I understand that as frustrated and hurt and beleaguered as I am, someone's got to talk to white folks to say, someone knew that man had a record in Minneapolis and they still let him go out on the street. Somebody knew how that man felt about Black people. Somebody understood that stuff, but nobody said anything. Dr. King talked about, it wasn't the racist. That guy is one guy, there's a lot like him, but we can kind of find those out. Somebody will say, I knew it. What's really smothering the work, Dan, Samantha, others, is the good white people who are silent and who aren't asking questions in the HR department, who are just saying, what do you mean we can't find people? Aren't there Black folks in this community who could refer people? And it's not their job to be headhunters. Can we contract Black people to find Black people? See, you start getting white people asking those questions. Why don't we celebrate Black History Month at our school? Why are there no books by Black authors? Why are only the Black kids reading Black books? See, once white people begin to ask questions, it changes the stuff. So Black people have been asking white colleagues, speak up, speak up. When that noose incident happened at Camp Randall, I put a call out to my JA circle and I said, Black people, we know. They know what we're going to do. We're going to get pissed. They're going to come to Urban League and they're going to bring all their Black people. They're going to say, we're sorry, we're sorry. So I asked my white colleagues who graduated from Wisconsin, I need white alumni. They fired the chancellor up. They fired Barry Alvarez up. The chancellor put up, just an auto response. We got your email. We got your email. You got your email. But within a few days, I'm getting a phone call from the chancellor. Sounds like you want to talk to me. Black people do that all the time. But when white alumni started saying, I'm ashamed. I have 3 degrees from Wisconsin. I wish I could give them back. Do you understand the level of shame that puts on a university? Because they expect Black people ain't never happy anyway. So they're going to be pissed about something. Even if we give them February, they're complaining because it's the coldest and shortest month. They're never happy. But when our white allies are saying the same thing, it shook stuff up. Your voice matters, and you know it does. That's the personal power people have. That's the power that privilege has given you. That if you stop and say, this is wrong, that we must stop and take this seriously because now this person is very upset. So the big piece of this is that we need people to understand, you stay close to the issues and understand that unless we're committed, our grandparents thought that this was fixed. Our parents thought this was fixed. Black people are trying to tell us it's not fixed, it's not fixed, it's not fixed. So now all of this is happening. Tony Robinson was killed in Madison. We got all up in arms. As a Black person, I knew that that officer's dad was my daughter's pediatrician and saved her life when she was 1 pound. My daughter was born Thanksgiving weekend and was not due until March. Matt Kenny's dad saved my daughter's life. It was front page news when Lexi came home from the hospital. So as a Black man, I had to call Matt Kenny's dad and say, how are you doing? Now I'm pissed at what he did, but I had to check on him because he helped save my daughter's life. And although I'm pissed at what his son did, I needed to know what he as a dad was doing. As a Black person, I'm always trying to think about white people, always trying to take care of Black people. It's just ingrained in us, white people. We want to say stuff, but we want to hurt people's feelings. We want to say things, but we're afraid people are going to start crying. But we're always thinking about how we bring white people in, how we build allyships. We don't think that that has returned a favor. If you take a look at civil rights, almost no one benefited from that work more than white women. And every group that was bridged to their rights because of the marching and the death and the treatment of Black people, all those groups have grown and don't even know our history and don't even know that we helped to open the doors for those kinds of discussions and that kind of freedom. And we just feel like we're out here and people think that we're criminals and they think that we're just lazy and we just want handouts. And so if we don't understand how convoluted this is, and if we don't commit to the long game, our kids are going to inherit this problem with fewer skills. And we're going to be seeing stuff like this in another 40, 50 years. I just don't think we can afford it. I just don't think we can.
Absolutely. We do have a question related to that. And they write, as a Black person, how can I healthily engage and respond with my well-meaning white associates and friends without being exhausted with the heaviness?
You can't. So you have to know who really gets it. You have to know that. So I would say for Black people, take care of yourself. And so Samantha, please know that I'm not saying you can't help people. I'm just saying you can't help people without exhaustion. Mm-hmm. Because like I'm getting calls from white people I haven't seen since high school who are saying, let's go back to the place where race didn't matter. Like, who said it didn't matter? I graduated from West High School, 500 students. I'm one of 8 Black students. I did not have a single Black male teacher. I didn't have a single Black male or female teacher in 4 years. Who said it didn't matter? So when you try to explain that to people who say to me at reunions, because they've been reading the papers and I'm kind of into this race stuff, but Alex, we didn't see race. Gosh, we just saw you as the funny guy, the track captain, the good runner. So I have to explain, if I choose to, what that was like. So I would just say, what you got to do with your friends is find the folks who are really sincere. If you say, go read this, go check this out, and they come back and say, I did, can we process it? That's a really good litmus test. Because there are people who really are sincere, and if you keep getting frustrated with folks, you don't have the energy for the people who really mean it. I also say just use that gut, that mother wit that your mom and grandmother and people had. I don't know Dan a lot, but there's something about him that seems sincere. There was a comment he made on Twitter that made me think this is someone I want to connect with. I'm going to see how he's going to respond. And he followed up and he responded and did what he said he was going to do. Read what he's supposed to read, introduced me to who he's supposed to introduce me to, so then we took another step. I couldn't do this work without white allies supporting and talking about the history class. I'm telling you, white allies can turn things upside down. Samantha, in the 50s, when lunch counters were segregated, it was white women in North Carolina who came and sat with Black men and women. They didn't know them. This was North Carolina in the 50s. They sat with them on the lunch counters and said, if you're going to throw hot coffee on college students, you're going to throw it on us too. And they did. They threw scalding coffee on white women. Eventually, white men came because the white women were there. White women were told that they would be expelled, that they were caught protesting. They risked having to tell their mothers and fathers that as a woman in the 50s, they threw their education away. News cameras caught white women being scalded, sitting next to black men and women. Within 9 months, 54 cities changed their rules about segregation at the lunch counters because white women came and sat with black folks. That ought to make white women pissed at what Amy Cooper said. They shouldn't even wait for black men, black women to say something. They should be, oh, hell no, you're not going to set us back, because we sat with our black brothers and sisters. But because history doesn't tell you that, when you hear race relations, the immediate response is, oh, I'm guilty, I'm white, I'm not the man, but I'm the woman, you know, which is, and don't even know the history, don't even know how to ask each other. So what does it look like for us to sit at the lunch counter now? Because that got media's attention. It wasn't that white women fixed it, but white women did something that their parents didn't do. They did something that their professors didn't do. Hell, they did something their pastors didn't do. They sat next to black people in the colored section at the Woolworth, and America saw them getting scalded. She used that strength and that power in her body to stand as an ally. Allies got scalded. Allies stand with you. It changed it. 54 cities. It's history. Read it. Check it. And so we haven't even empowered white women to understand you have been helpful in the struggle, because somewhere I think those white women said, you know, if they do that to them, they're going to do it to us. It was right. Even the women's suffrage movement came out of the abolition, the slavery abolition movement. White women like Susan B. Anthony learned strategies of resistance from what Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman were doing with black people, in terms of, because they were fighting for women's rights and stuff. So even the history that white women have not learned, the role they played in civil rights, a very pivotal role, I just think it's wrong. Why not teach white women that? Because it would make them feel like we have a history of doing right. So now white women are afraid, do I have a place? Am I racist? Am I too white to help? Now there's all this fear. In the 50s, those white men walked off that campus and sat at that counter and said, do to me what you got to, but this is wrong. If you knew that that was in your history, and no one told them to do it, the black people didn't say, hey, over there at that all-woman college, bring your white self over here. They saw injustice and they said, we know what injustice feels like, and came and said, nobody told them. They said, let's go. But if we don't teach that, we don't even give white women a chance to understand you shaped history before, you'll do it again. And we need it, and we welcome you into that space. So I think, to my friend that's saying that, helping white people to understand the good part of history as well empowers people to do more and take more risks today. But guard yourself, because you can't do that for everyone. So send them to history classes, send them to read stuff, and the ones who are following through, build a rapport, because you need to understand that when this stuff goes on, I've got real friends who are non-black, real friends who are white. So I can't say all white people, because I know folks who are not like that. So we have to have those bridges, but I have friends who will educate themselves, because I can't be your friend and educate you, because that is exhausting. And so if you're exhausted, you're probably trying to do both. Let people educate themselves, and then y'all go out for, you know, a walk or dinner or lunch or something.
Thank you. I know I can speak for Dan and I. Definitely, we acknowledge that. We are so sincerely grateful that you have invested your time and your education and your resources in us today. We don't take that lightly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. A question that also came in a little bit relating to this would be, in response to the question about the exhaustion, right? And offering the education and the time and the resources, and investing in white people so that we can do and be better. For those of us who are non-minority, is this the right time to stop talking, pause, and listen? Today, of course, being Blackout Tuesday, I think that there is, people are torn between, do you keep talking? Do you keep committing yourself to, be a part of the change and to move forward and grow and learn and be better? Or do we just stop, and do we shut up, and do we listen and learn? And, what is the fine line there?
Samantha, I think we do all of those, and then we act where it's appropriate. I think we have to trust our hearts and act. Mm-hmm. So let's just say if it's a Blackout Tuesday, white people can do that. There's just so much fear, like, okay, should I not be doing this? Like, should I white out? Like, should I put an all white square up? Like, I think there gets to be so much fear. So I think what I would say to folks is you can never please everyone, but if your heart is sincere, that's what's really important. So I think like there's going to be a blackout on someday in July about blacks not shopping. I think white people could say, in solidarity with my black brothers and sisters, I'm not buying online either. Like those are things that are happening that people will come to say to people, well, that's not enough. That's not sincere. You know what? What are you doing? This is something I can do today. And so I think understanding that a real stand is a real stand. Nothing's going to be perfect. I'm black. And there's some things I said we should do. It hasn't worked out the way I wanted it to, but I get up the next day and I still engage. And if I've got people that I can bounce things off of, I can say, how does this sound? What do you think? If you built relationships and you're saying, is it okay for me to buy Blackout? Can I listen to Defending Black Girls? Can I buy a mug that says Black Like Me? Can I wear a Black Lives Matter t-shirt? Can I put a sign on? Yeah, if you know somebody black. Like, don't do that stuff and then you're scared to talk to black people. But if you're trying to show your friends through subtle things that I'm shifting my thinking about this, I think that's very important. And I think whatever efforts, however clumsily they are perceived, if they come out of a place of education, donation, affiliation, let them criticize you because at least you've done something. It has been the silence of well-intentioned people, not the missteps of good people that have gotten us to this point. So I want to really liberate my brothers and sisters who are white or non-black. Take steps. Take and listen, as long as people are acting and reading and doing the stuff Dan's asking, I'll show up and do coaching. This is part of my work. It took a while for people to understand that they thought because my movement was called Justified Anger, that I was just about supporting black people. And I do. My programs, housing, mass incarceration work, criminal justice work, it's largely serving. Nehemiah has one program side that really serves African-American folks. But if I don't work with the allies that are still judges, police officers, teachers, professors, et cetera, it's like training people to use an abacus and there are no jobs for abacus. Accountants aren't using that anymore. They're using something else. So I feel that having been raised in Madison, I can talk to my community, but because white folks are Madisonian, that's my community too. And I can train folks to begin to make a difference. You and Dan opened the door for me to talk to almost 400 people that I would not normally have access to. That's a major step, and they're listening and thinking. So to the extent that folks are willing to take steps and even ask clumsy questions, I'm willing to meet with folks because I am finding that some of my friends who are white who are saying, we never felt invited in. And part of that is folks have said, this is what we're going to do. Many of my white professionals will be like, okay, this is what we're going to do in terms of what happened with Tony Robinson, what happened with George Floyd. This is what needs to happen, without even asking black people what they need. So I think part of the invitation is that people have not waited for it, or maybe we didn't offer it. Somehow we've missed each other. But in this moment, I think there's time to give folks grace. If we didn't step up before, if we didn't step in before, let's start brand new. But for folks who are trying to figure out the next steps, as long as they're willing to do things that we're putting out to them, I'm willing to either coach those that are coaching them or do some coaching for them, because unless the broader part of Madison says enough is enough, it won't really change. And so that's why I'm spending time working with folks who want to be white allies, because we can state our cause, but we don't have enough positional power to really bring about change. And when white people start complaining about foundations not giving as much to black communities as they do to others, when they start complaining about school districts, when they start complaining about dropout and not just see it as our problem, but the communities, change will really happen. So we take allyship very seriously because this won't change without you all.
And Dr. G, as you're talking about education, there was a question too that came in before this session, which is not only should we be educating ourselves, right? The question came in, what can teachers do to educate white students to be allies? So you talked about kids, right, being our future. So what can teachers be doing right now around this topic?
Teachers can really, teachers are human beings who are trained to educate, but it doesn't mean that they didn't grow up with implicit bias. And so teachers have got to check their hearts as well. I'm still in touch with my third grade teacher. His name is Eric Lilliquist. He taught me at Leopold in third grade. But he treated all students with such respect. I was new to the area. I'd grown up in an all-black environment. I was in third grade, in an all-black environment. But there was a love he had for all students that made me feel that I could be smart. But it's interesting, when I got to high school, I would be told things like, I'm a smart Black kid. I'm a good looking Black kid. I guess like if I were white, I'd be ugly or dumb. But just those qualifiers that made me think that people saw race first. Mr. Lilliquist wasn't like that. And he brought out intelligence. I mean, it was there, but he gave me a room to really share, because I realized I'd kind of hidden that from my all Black learning experience as a kid who went through Head Start, kindergarten, and first grade. So I think teachers have got to take the history class. Teachers have got to read. Teachers got to understand these things. I've talked to teachers and friends of teachers who have said, Black kids have so much stress at home. I don't want to pressure them by trying to get them to turn their homework in on time or trying to do this. So by trying to be helpful, they lower the standard. Education has always been our way out. It has always been our way out. So if Black kids have got to thrive and be pushed anywhere, it's got to be in education. There's a lot of pressure on teachers. They have larger classrooms, mental health issues, so many issues. They inherit what parents don't deal with. And so it's a wonder they're able to even do what they're able to do. But I think we have assumed that people don't have these issues and that they don't wrestle with it. When I was talking with a gentleman named Chad, who was a former police officer in Indiana, Minnesota, I asked him about the officer who killed George Floyd. He said, the profession makes you cynical. And so I said, why didn't anybody see that in the screening process? He said, I think the job made him that way. So wait, hold it. No. There's a lot of people that have been in that job and they don't and wouldn't do that. But the sense that there really are no evil people, because we don't know who the KKK is, so there really are no white races. There's no real check that people through their own experiences or lack of experiences have these perceptions. They have these perceptions, and if it's never challenged, and then all of a sudden you have your first Black kid ever in your class, and you haven't wrestled with that, and so you have a difference of opinion about how they live, who their parents are, how they learn. Is their mom just going to be mad if I say that Johnny's not reading? Am I racist? No, his score says he can't read. That's not racist. You're racist if you don't say something. But I think teachers have all this fear. So we're even doing work like this, Daniel, Samantha, with MTI, Madison Teachers, Inc., with various school districts to help teachers really wrestle with this, because teachers don't realize that that's in their heart until something happens and they think, I thought that, but I didn't say anything. My colleague is in the Oregon school district, and his son was called the N-word. His daughter is picked on. Stuff's being thrown at them. They're not racist. They're kids. And his question was, how many times does my daughter have to be hit in the head with an object before it's then considered racist? Because let's get to that number. But teachers, when they came up as guests on my podcast, they were like, one lady said, my husband's a teacher at that school. He never mentioned that to me at home. So teachers didn't talk about it. They didn't talk about the issues. There was the silence. They're good people. You don't want to be a bad teacher. You don't want to try to bring up race. It's just kids being, and I just think teachers, social workers, doctors, judges who don't have those experiences, don't have those lenses, they have a very low base of what Black normality is. And so they accept things. And so people have to do the work, check the implicit bias, do the work, or we can't move ahead.
And I would say, I'm just, again, trying to watch time a little bit. Samantha, if you have one more question, I want to ask one that just came in. So 2 more questions to you, Dr. G.
Sure.
This is an inverse question, which is interesting. So is there something that white people shouldn't do?
Dan, you stole my question, Dan.
Oh. Okay, well, maybe this is the last question. There's a lot more that we'll be following up on.
I can definitely find another.
But is there something that white people shouldn't be doing? And are there things that come across as overstepping or offensive?
Let's first of all just state that we're all going to rub each other the wrong way because we're human beings. When our church was all Black, there were people who got on my nerves. As we become diverse, like that didn't just start new problems, because they're just relational things, differences that we rub up against each other. So I think I want to just first of all say we got to give each other some grace. That's just a real big part of this work. I'll raise the bar hard. I'll push people hard. I won't let them bullshit me. I'll say, that's crap. You can't say that to me. That's not right. Think through that, and then come back. But I think the big thing that whites shouldn't do is to assume that they know the solutions. And this happens all the time in Madison. White leaders will get in a room of business leaders and they will try to fix a troubled neighborhood. And nobody in that room is Black. Nobody in that room is poor. And so they're trying to fix something, and then they're going to come back and put it out to folks. And if we don't respond and don't show up, like, they don't care about their kids. They're intimidated by the schools. They're too busy to come to meetings. So don't set the agenda. Ask people not what to do, but is there something I can do to be helpful? And if it's read, study, okay, I'll go do that. But I would say not assume that you know what to do. Don't assume that you're not a part of the problem or benefiting from the problem just because you never burned a cross or you've done something. If you don't have to give your children the talk, if you don't have to talk about some of these other unspoken things, if you don't have to worry about how you perceive work walking in the neighborhood at nighttime, those things are all part and parcel of white privilege. It doesn't make you a bad person. It just means the system is working. But if it's so a white person should not just say, well, I'm not a part of it. I'm not a racist, so I'm good. Let's go get the racists fixed. Don't assume that you're not connected in somehow, because by being American and benefiting from this, there are just certain things that you've inherited. I would also say don't speak for Black people. Don't listen to what a Black person says and then go argue with another Black person. Say, well, that's not true because Reverend G said that's not true. That makes Black people mad. And I think don't feel like you've got to fight the really harsh racist. I think like when I was having a discussion with a colleague today, and they said, oh, I wish this were recorded so I could play to my friend what you said. And I said, no, you don't have to be Black or understand Black. Understand white and privilege. That's the best that you can do. Understand that. So don't absolve yourself from any responsibility because I'll never be Black, I'll never understand it, so this is just heart-wrenching and I'm just going to go home and not really think about it. Relate to the power structure and how it's been set up and the fact that you can choose to not talk, to turn the channel because you don't know anybody Black, don't love anybody Black, you don't work with anybody Black, you don't play tennis with anybody, but you don't go to church with anybody or temple with anybody Black, so you can turn it off and not even interact. Don't do that. Those are things that white people shouldn't do. And let someone else call you an ally. Let someone else call you up. Because when people arrive, it's not that people aren't allies, but when people arrive, they're no longer teachable. They begin to tell you how to do stuff and how to plan stuff and how to organize. And so I think that those are some things that I would say. But behind it, I would say, if people will humble themselves to learn the issues, to study, to educate, donate, assimilate, they can build relationships. They can become allies. They can become facilitators. Some of the close relationships I have built are with folks who have become our facilitators. They've helped us to market events. They've helped us to set up screenings. They're going to help us with our reentry conference. That I don't build cross-cultural relationships about talking, but by working together. It's why the military and sports teams have done such a good job of building cross-cultural relationships. They're not perfect, but because they have a common enemy. It's the outsider. It's Michigan. It's not Wisconsin. It's Maryland. It's Rutgers. When you have a common enemy and you are not that enemy, you must lean in to each other. And by understanding that we're much, much, much better together is what's really important. And so I would say the last thing is don't think that this doesn't benefit you. Because as you look at State Street, Michigan Avenue in Chicago, and I would just want to say for folks who didn't ask, I don't condone destruction of property. I will say I do understand it. Now, not the sense of looting. There are people out there just doing stupid stuff. But at some point, if you don't when that pain mounts, craziness happens. We don't know what made that officer want to kill that day. We don't know what made people just want to loot that day. And so I'm not justifying that kind of stuff, but people are out their minds because while this is happening, COVID-19 is happening, then you got a president that's tear gassing people and then holding up the Bible. That's my profession. Now I'm really pissed because he's messed with my race and now my profession. When it mounts, people just sort of lose their sense. I think we can still do this with peaceful protest. I think we can do things that work and that are constructive, but I would just think, don't avoid thinking that this somehow touches you. And I don't mean by destruction coming to your neighborhoods, but it's damaging to your children to think because it's been unchecked, because society says you're smarter, you're prettier, you're more handsome, you're better, you're more qualified to lead. that's going to cause problems. And our children are going to live in a much more diverse world than we do, which means the opportunity to clash is greater. And we just got to love that next generation enough to not let them inherit this crap. Hope that was helpful, Samantha.
That was really helpful, and I guess a great lead into what my final question would be. If we can dive a little further into the talk that you've talked about several times, right? And I know we've had multiple questions on that, and I'm getting personal text messages from the mamas in my inner circle,
Sure.
and just any insights that you can share, and just share your heart a little bit on what that talk looks like, and if you were able to be in that room with us, what you would hope that we would say.
Well, just know this, Samantha. At some point, I would probably do this with a couple of my African-American sisters. But if some offshoot of this can happen where white moms of young kids would like to have this discussion somewhat at length, please know I'm available.
Amazing.
For that, because we want people to do it. I think it begins with our libraries. I think just having a talk with the schools and say, now what diverse books are there? And not just books where Black kids are living, in Harlem and they don't have a dad and the mom is there and it's all, let's get a mixture of it. My first book, my daughter's a library grad student in the library sciences. And I wrote her one day, I said, honey, the most checked out book was called A Snowy Day. And she's like, we've talked about that in school. It's the most checked out book in Harlem in like over 125 years. I said, baby, that's my favorite book. My mom let me read. That's the first book I learned to read. But it wasn't until that came up on Google and I shared it with my daughter. Samantha, I got teary-eyed because I realized it's the first book I remember that had a Black kid in it. Salt and Pepper, Dick and Jane, they were white. They didn't look like kids in my class. They didn't look like kids on the west side of Chicago. They didn't look like kids on my street. I didn't know who they were. But that little kid in that red outfit, I could identify him. And it wasn't about the white glistening snow stood in comparison to my dark skin. It was just a kid doing what kids do. Reading that, because that's a book where the Black kid is a star, but he's just being a kid. Have you ever taken your kids to clinics, like where there's a little play area? This is when we used to be able to be in the same space with each other. Please let that happen again. Kids will play together, Black, white, Asian, Latino. They don't see stuff. It's not until like third grade where people are like, oh, she's a girl, she's got cooties, or, oh, your skin is dark, you look dirty. We start learning that, and then you have to ask yourself, where do kids get that? Where do they hear it? And so I think it's important to understand our children are not born with that innate ability to hate each other, that little kids will play, they'll hug. Like, it's just, I will watch them, like when I would take my daughter when she was a baby, I would take her to those appointments and I would think, my heart is breaking because in 8 years, they're not going to do that. They're not allowed to date each other. They're not allowed to celebrate each other's culture. They're going to go different ways. And just kind of having that flash forward is just sad. So I think having moms to understand with young kids, you can capture their hearts before they learn that. So I ran track. My mom would have track movie parties. My mom would be out there with a Super 8 camera in the 70s filming our meets, that she would have my team over and would cook and do stuff. So it wasn't strange for my friends to be in a Black person's home in the south side of Madison. Now, back in the day, people thought the south side of Madison was Inglewood, California, or something. But my mom made a point of making sure that my friends saw where I lived. You know what? Those friends had me in their homes. And 40 years later, many of us are still friends and kept connecting with each other. We know each other's children. So I would say to parents, ask librarians, like, where are the books that just the protagonist is a Black child? They're talking about discovering butterflies, things that little kids do. I'll just push this. My sister is an artist. In fact, she's downtown today painting a mural on one of the wine shops downtown because they reached out to her. Now, it's pictures of Black girls, but my sister grew up as a Barbie fanatic. And so when Chrissy, I think her name was, the Black girl, and then the teenager, it changed her world because dolls looked like her. But every Black child in my era grew up with white dolls. Baby That-A-Way, Raggedy Ann, all of them, which sort of indicated that they weren't beautiful and they weren't thoughtful. White parents can get artwork, and that's not called, what's the word when you're taking over somebody's culture? That's not acculturation. That's like there's artwork so that kids begin to think, well, there's a poster of someone who's Black and a poster of someone who's white and a poster of someone, maybe who's seeing impaired. are visually impaired, like that becomes normalized. And now, because of things that are online, people can buy those blankets, they can buy those shower curtains, they can buy those rugs, where it begins to happen. So my sister's doing these shows, there will be white girls who will walk up to her table and see pictures of young girls, but their parents will steer them away because they're thinking, that's for Black girls, that's not for you. White Barbie was for all the Black girls. And so I think folks don't know that they can do those kinds of things, that they can read those kinds of books, that they can build relationships. So kids will take seriously what you read. They will learn to love who you love. You know, if I want, you know, I've had friends from different ethnic groups stay in our home. We stay in their home. So I've got friends who are white and Korean, and my daughter calls them Uncle Peter, Uncle John, Uncle Fred, Uncle Bill, because in her mind, those are my brothers and their wives or their aunts. But when you model it, it becomes really normal. We shouldn't make it abnormal. It takes extra work, but I love these folks anyway. But my daughter's learning to do it as we're watching it. During the World Cup a couple of years ago, I took my daughter to Korea. Some of our Korean friends invited us for me to speak at an event. And my daughter said, "Daddy, come here quick. You know, our people are playing. Our people are playing." So I thought it was like West Africa. I thought it was like, so I ran in there and it was like South Korea. I was like, we just came back from Korea. She's like, "These are my people." I said, "Daddy, our people are playing today. They're playing in the World Cup today." And so I think we can help that to not be weird for our children, but it can't be weird for us. Mm-hmm. But our children are so teachable. And I think we want our children to be colorblind. And what we create is something that's not helpful. And we've been taught that. I don't blame white people for that. Somehow their generation taught them, don't see it. Like, "Mommy, look at that, but shh, don't say it." Like some of my white friends were like, "Okay, describe the person who's looking for me." Well, they were like 5'10", and like, well, were they Black? Were they white? Well, it's almost a bad word. It's like, you know, this is not the curse of Ham. I love being Black. Like, it's not bad if you say that, but I think people are just so bad. Like, if I see difference, I might seem racist. No, telling yourself you don't see a difference and appreciating what I bring to the table and exposing your children to it, that's racist. So anything we can do to help parents to understand how to get that artwork, how to read those books, talk to your school. You know, there are not enough Black teachers in here. What are we going to do? And how do we bring this stuff to we're growing in a pluralistic world. And we're not preparing our kids to be world leaders if they think the whole world is white. That's not preparing a workforce and leaders, world leaders. They have to know, all of our children have to know how to interact. Black children, Latino children, Asian American children, they know how to interact in white culture. We do it and we come home and we code switch. White children don't know how to interact with us, and they're going to grow up to be the supervisors who are trying to hire, and they don't have this experience, or they're going to be supervised by people of color, and they're going to be thinking, well, how did they get that job? Was that an affirmative action hire, or what made them higher than me? So I think the best line of defense for all of this are white parents and how they just talk to their children about the reality of the world and how everyone is important. And let's not think that people are bad because they look different, and then do whatever we can to put them in places where they learn culture, study culture, read culture, and interact with people from that culture. I implore parents, you can make a difference. My mom did a lot of things wrong, but exposing me to her white friends and making them feel like family, that helped me navigate Madison as a white place as I came here. But I also had white friends whose parents taught their children to respect. And so I had really good experience. I might have had a few bad experiences, a few nut cases. And maybe there was ignorance because people didn't know anything about my culture. But I have always felt a level of acceptance as a person around many of my white friends. But I think someone helped them in that journey, and they didn't just come upon that on their own. So I want to remind parents, there are a lot of good children out there, just encourage them.
Okay, thank you. And I know we are tight on time and we want to get wrapped up. But I would love, even if we can save this for the next conversation, I think that a large struggle around the talk and the way that maybe I was referencing it, and some of like the mamas that I know and the parents that I talk to would be the talk around what's happening today, right? And the pervasive, persistent injustice and inequality. I think that struggle between not wanting to, rob them of their innocence, and ruin kind of their unawareness, but also understanding that that is, that's perpetuating the lack of education and awareness. But how do you, with, my daughter who's 8, how do we sit down when she asks the question about what she's seeing and, hearing, how do we talk through that? And I know that's a larger topic as well. And we can
I would here, there are a lot of kids' books that are written by Dr. King and some of the work that he's done. So I think that's a place to really start. And don't let the children might start talking about looting and fight. Like, it's so easy to start there. I was on a TV interview recently. Someone said, well, what do you feel about this violence? Like, do I look like I condone violence? I said, but your information is wrong. There's been violence for 400 years. Let's talk about the real violence. And so I just think there are books and things that folks can Google will help in other media to talk about what that looks like. But just know there are really good books about Rosa Parks and Dr. King and people who tried to make the world fair for everybody. And although it's not good, sometimes when people become really upset, they do bad things. And we have to listen to people when they say that they're hurting. So I think really diverting that discussion from that. And I would even say to white people about their white friends who want to say, well, what about they're burning up their own community? So then what was the discussion before the looting started and the rioting started? Where were those same folks? Like, what were they blaming? They want to know, well, what did Floyd do to be arrested in the first place? Well, it certainly wasn't anything that warranted death. So finding out how you want to do that. And Samantha, you and your friends are bringing up a very, very real thing about robbing people of their innocence. But folks, and that's what's so dangerous, that's what racism has done to you.
Yeah.
That's what white supremacy has done, because when people, because that's the real battle. It's not like, I don't want my child not to know. I don't want my child to be a racist, but you're wrestling with innocence. And that's so tough. But my innocence was lost. I understood race dynamics while I still believe that Santa was real. That bubble was burst for me in 1970 as a 6-year-old, and I still believed in Santa Claus until I was 9. Imagine what that does to a parent and their innocence. But it helped me to somehow protect myself. And in some ways, in that setting, it wasn't really necessary. But she couldn't not talk to me about it because she was dealing with it through a lens of a woman born in 1939 who watched all kinds of segregation. So she didn't want me to walk in unprepared. And so I just know white parents, that Black parents are ruining their kids' innocence by just having to explain, Mommy, why did that man have his knee on that man? And it's, again, I'm not saying it's what you get because we're talking about it, but just the sense that for our white friends, it's innocence. For me, it's survival. If my parents if they didn't teach me that, the fear was I could die. So my generation was raised that by the time the lights came on, you better be on this front porch. When you go to Walgreens, you better get a receipt in the bag. Because if the white person says you stole, you're going to end up in the back of a car and we might not see you anymore. Drive with 10 and 2. For us, they only break our innocence because it may save our lives. For our white friends, it doesn't save their lives. Something else is at risk. And I totally get, I'm not even belittling that. I think that question is so honest, but what we're wrestling with is innocence and survival. Our parents don't want to tell us either. But the point is, the folks who mistreated us, the men that were shouting blood and soil, those things, either someone didn't have the talk or they didn't do it well. They think the Jewish people, Black people, Latino people, immigrants are taking something from them. They think that this is theirs, and if we just get in place, America will be great again. When women couldn't vote, when Black people couldn't vote, when we couldn't own property. Like, this is actually a mantra of a president. Let's make America great again. Like, we're only like 250 years old. When the hell are you talking about where were we great, that we weren't stepping on someone's neck to make America a world power? We've been a world power for a long time, but we haven't always been great because we have not loved all of those within our borders. That's the talk. That's really the talk that white moms have got to have with each other. We're damned if we do and if we don't. If we have it, it's what we're doing. And if we don't, so a lot of people don't do it. It's like see no evil. And then kids are smart. They begin to say dark, TV, dangerous, and they begin to make all of that. And by the time parents decide to talk about it and build relationships and have a different bar for understanding what Black normalcy is, those things are already built in their heads. And while we think we're quiet, everything then begins to confirm them. Then their kids begin to talk, and then there are songs and things, and it just gets so hard. So please, let's pick that up. Let's talk about it. I'd love to get some Black moms in to talk about the talk, because that's absolutely one of the best things that we can do, because not letting that sense of pride, and not pride, that we all need it, a privilege and supremacy set up inside us is the best thing we can do, because trying to deprogram that is really hard. It's really hard.
So I just wrote that down, Dr. G, as where we can definitely start, because that is, and thank you for still giving us that much for that question. And so I wrote that down to definitely start the discussion there next. And I want to take some time and thank you for your time, but more importantly, you know, we talked about being uncensored, speaking from the heart. Thank you for doing that.
Sure.
That is exactly what we needed to hear. And this is the kind of discussion our communities, not just Madison, all of the communities that are listening in. We still have almost 200 people who are still listening in, which is amazing.
Right.
This is what we needed to have talked about tonight. So thank you for that and making this so personable as well.
My pleasure.
And so just a couple quick logistical things. We definitely have more questions. We will get a summary of all of the questions we got today that we didn't get to. As a reminder, we are setting up a follow-up. Again, Dr. G was gracious enough to say, let's come back, right? Because it's all about driving action, not just talking. So in 4 weeks to 5 weeks, we'll come back, pick up those questions, talk about what you've applied. We will send out the resources in the next day or two. Just a matter of how much we get that, how long it takes to get that done. And then just a reminder, there was another question that came in about a video. So if you joined a little late, we did record the session. We will work with the teams behind the scenes to clean this up. It will be an available resource. And I don't want to commit to a time, so that will be coming. And then we are, like I said, if there's any volunteers that want to help with the next event, Samantha and others on the team really help pull this together behind the scenes. This is not something that I just did. There was a lot of manpower behind this, or power, I apologize, power behind this. And so if there's other volunteers that want to help, how do we start having small discussions with the groups and make this even more interactive? It's just going to take more people to help with these events. So let's just keep this going. And with that, unless there's something else, Dr. G or Samantha, we'll adjourn.
I will say this. We're in this mode where there's so much that we're trying to communicate. There's so much of this that we want to put into a 1-minute video, a 2-minute video, a sort of snippet. So I'll just put it out there that one thing that we're always short on are folks who are really adept at editing and photography and culling the internet for information. So I just want to put that out there, that there's so much more that I think we could flood the community with, but it comes faster than what we can do. So I just want to put that out there. I know you're going to say that as a resource of where you go to learn, but I'm saying for those that have that skill, that's one place where Nehemiah and our director of storytelling could really use some professional support, because I think people are hungrier. I'll just say this. We broke our download for Black Like Me podcast today by 400 downloads. And we didn't even advertise it because it's blackout. The white community is saying, we're not going to sleep on this. We're not going to be on the wrong side of this. We're looking for information. So I feel that there's a responsibility of helping to create that content to help educate people and inspire them. So please, Dan has your email. Reach out to Dan. Dan has shared with me, but editors, videographers, photographers, folks who understand just how do we use the digital platforms, apps. We want to really up our game to really touch more people. So please holler at us. And Dan will let you know all of our social media platforms too that you can follow us on.
Yep. And for anyone who's on here who, through Facebook, through Twitter, I will provide my email address as well as a personal phone, so you guys can reach out to me at any point. we want to make sure we can link everybody and keep the conversations going, because that's the power of where this was just the start tonight.
Definitely. I would say, if I can just follow up with Dr. G and his mention of his podcast, Black Like Me. If we, like so many of us, I know we're waiting on these resources. We're really excited to continue, digging in and doing better. And I would say, if you can start there, start there. I have learned so much and really, really appreciated the exposure and the education and the topics through your podcast. So definitely.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening, Samantha.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for offering.
Sure.
All right. And so with that, thanks everyone, and have a good night, and look for the resources and the details to come.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone.
Have a good night.